Am I the asshole for not speaking Japanese after living here for 6 years? I, 34 female, met my 33 male husband online, and we got married 6 years ago. I moved from my home country to live with him in Japan since then. He is Japanese and has a stable job here. On the other hand, I'm a freelance illustrator, so I was okay moving. Every day I use English with him. Maybe you notice already, but English is not my first language. So it is not perfect, but neither is my husband's English, but at least we can communicate. I tried my best to learn Japanese to be able to communicate with his friends and family, but Japanese is not an easy language. I have to learn how to read kanji, hiragana, and katakana from zero all by myself. During COVID 2020, we got money from the government and he bought me some books and dictionaries, telling me to learn the language more intensively during the lockdown. He didn't teach me anything though. He said since I could speak 4 languages, adding 1 more language should be easy for me. I tried, but it is never good enough for him. He always said my grammar sucks, but I do always have problems with grammar. As you can see, my English grammar sucks too. He said I should be able to speak like a native at this point. So last year, summer 2022, I decided that I would get a part-time job at a restaurant so that I can practice more of my Japanese. To my surprise, the staff there like me, and they can understand my Japanese. I also now could read and write several kanjis. I could write my own address with kanjis and read menus. Last week, we had a family dinner with his family. During the dinner, I made some grammar mistake, which was not actually quite bad because everybody still understood what I was trying to say. But my husband says, in front of my family, quote, I was stupid for not understanding the correct grammar. It makes me upset because he said it in front of everyone. So I said in English, quote, your English is not better than me, and you can't speak my language. Why do you call me stupid? He was so pissed off and won't talk to me since then. We do have an edit from OP. He is not a bad guy. I love him so much. He is just very outspoken. If he dislikes something, he would say it right away. He never comments about my body or looks, but he is very sensitive about my skills. He often criticized my art style and other skills. He said I am lazy. There is no excuse not to master the language since I am living here for almost 6 years now. Maybe this is me trying to defend myself, but last year I got my N3/JLPT, Japan Language Proficiency Test, Level 3 certification. He said it must be out of luck because my Japanese is very rough. And he said I should have gotten the level 1 already because I have been here for so long. So we got divorced.
Ooh.
I think about it more and more, and I feel like this 6 years has been hell for me. I am tired of trying to find any reason to think he is good for me. I found a full-time job in Japan with a company and started working there from last January. Everybody in my new company said I speak Japanese very well, and so far I am doing great. I rented my own apartment, and I'm surviving by my own just fine in Tokyo. Albeit my ex-husband saying that I would never be able to survive in Japan without him. I have a crush on another guy, but I'm taking it slowly.
I've taken my brother's cemetery plots. They won't know until one of them dies. My mother never shared the details of her will with me or anyone in the family. When she died, we all learned she made me her executor of her will. My 2 brothers were very upset that their little sister, who has an MBA and has a solid family life, was picked over them. Neither of them finished college, and one of them is an invalid who hasn't left his house in years. My mom left her house to the 2 brothers with instructions that I sell the house valued at around $250,000 and divide the money between them. All of her cash was to be divided between the heirs. Her other property was a small vacation home where her and my dead sister's ashes would be scattered. She left it to me and my dead sister's children. 30 or so years earlier, one of the brothers had told her he wanted to build his own cabin, so she deeded him an adjoining lot. Where she died, it was still an empty lot. He convinced one of my nieces to sell him her share of the cabin for $1 and not to tell anyone of the heirs before the paperwork was signed. The only way I found out was because he posted on Facebook, I'm now a proud partial owner of the family's mountain cabin. According to my lawyer, no one can keep me out of it. We aren't friends on Facebook, but some mutual relatives are, and they alerted me to what had happened. In the state that we live in, even if fractional ownership allows the partial owners to enter the property anytime without restrictions. There were some very ugly emails between him and my niece when she tried to get the property back. And she admitted he did it out of spite to hurt me and make sure my family and I didn't get to enjoy the property. Brother number 2 had emailed my niece several times and told her he was so proud of her for selling to her uncle and he'd never seen his brother so happy. Mom's will was written so that the estate would retain ownership of all property, including real estate, until the probate process was completed. My brother didn't understand that and thought he would have immediate ownership. His lawyer didn't read the will will very well and thought the same thing. The only way to get the share of the cabin away from him was for my niece to refuse her shares of the inheritance. Even with that, it cost the $600,000 estate, including the house she left to them, roughly $30,000 in attorney fees to fight this. But we won and the cabin is safe. I don't know how much he had to pay his lawyers, but it was a lot of money. The situation drug on for months. The property my mom had given him sits directly across from the cabin. Out of spite and anger, he clear-cut the property mom had given him and brought in over 100 tons of gravel, so the wooded area now looks like a gravel parking lot. This is directly next to the place where mom and sister's ashes are scattered. My brothers had asked for the 3 burial spots next to my dad. They adored and idolized him. My mom is scattered at the cabin and she won't be using them. So I gave them the cemetery plot paperwork. But before probate ended, I had the plots put in my name and they are now legally mine. The paperwork they have is worthless, but they don't know it. I didn't tell my brothers and they won't find out until one of them dies and they can't be buried next to my dad. Honestly, I know dad wouldn't have approved of what they did. He loved mom and he would be upset her ashes are scattered next to a gravel covered lot, not the woods she loved. I haven't told them what I've done. Screw them. They wasted money from her estate and made mom's resting place look horrible. They don't deserve to be buried next to my dad.
I broke up with my boyfriend because I thought he was cheating on me, but years later I'd find out the truth. Story time. So me and my ex-boyfriend, who we will call Steve, had been together for about 2 years. This all started when we decided that we were going to plan a little trip together. I had been saying for years that I wanted to go to Switzerland, so that is what we decided to do. Let me tell you, as soon as that plane trip and that holiday was booked, Steve started to act really, really different. He was starting to be home less and less. He'd started to hide his phone from me. When I asked him how his day had been, he'd be like, yeah, fine. And one of the biggest red flags was when he started to get late night calls. He'd be lying in bed and his phone would start ringing and he would literally like jump into action, run out of the room to answer the call. I was getting so suspicious at this point. So one day his best friend Dave comes round to our house. I explained how I was feeling, what Steve had been like. He was so fidgety, he was really awkward with me. And this is when I accepted that my boyfriend was definitely having an affair. He was cheating on me, his best friend was just covering for him. I'm not in the market to let anybody disrespect me like that. One day when I got home from work, I walked straight into my room and I started to pack my bags. Steve eventually got home, he saw what I was doing and seemed so confused. He was trying to stop me from packing. I was so angry. I was like, you know what you've done. I've been driven to do this. I literally couldn't even look at him. After I called my brother and he came to pick me up. I stayed with my brother for a few days and Steve and all of his family kept trying to contact me, so I decided to just block them all. Oh, bold moves coming from our girl today. A week later, my brother came home with a letter addressed to me from Steve. And I was like, there is no way I am reading this. I tore it up straight away and it went straight into the bin. I didn't need his excuses. I didn't need his scrambling to get me back. Let's fast forward 3 years to yesterday. I'm sat in a little cafe, I am doing my work, and I look up and who stood in front of me? It was Dave. Now, I hadn't seen Dave since that night when he was all shifty and awkward. I had no issues with Dave, so I went over and I went to say hi. This man was not happy to see me. He turned to me and told me that I must be one of the most awful, cold-hearted women on the planet. I was like, oh, that feels a little bit personal, Dave. Don't feel like I've done anything to you. And I was like, why? And this is when he told me that Steve had been planning to propose to me in Switzerland. When I tell you, I was so shocked. I literally dropped my cup of coffee. The late night calls were from an event planner that was in Switzerland. All I could do was look at him with the most guilt ever. I feel like the nastiest woman ever. I literally had it all and I could have had a husband by now with a brilliant man if I had just asked what was going on. So what do you think I should do now? Or should I reach out to Steve and apologise, see if he wants to rekindle and get to know each other again? What do you think I should do?
The only way I'll survive is if I avoid somewhere I'm convinced is my home. You've never been here before. I was on my way home from work and everything was completely normal until I got to my apartment building. And that was the sign that I saw glued on the front door. You've never been here before. I thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it. I walked inside and went into my elevator, and there, glued next to the buttons, was another sign. All the floors will feel right. None of them are. I wondered if it was some kind of art project or maybe some teens in the building playing a weird prank. So I pressed the number 7 to go up to my floor, and when the doors opened, right in front of my shoes was another note. It's not too late to turn back. As I passed by the note, I got a really uneasy feeling in my stomach, but I was tired and hungry and just decided to ignore it, deal with it later. I wondered if there were notes on every floor of my building or just mine, but I decided I'd investigate later. I probably would have forgotten about the whole thing, but that's when I opened the front door of my apartment, and there, in the wall directly across from my door, is another note. This is not your home. My body was completely frozen. I knew what that note meant, and it meant that somebody had been inside my apartment to put it there. I slammed my door closed and bolted it and went around the entire apartment looking to see if somebody was in there. I checked in my closet, in the pantry, under my bed, under the couch. I mean, my apartment's not that big. There's not many places someone could hide. Finally, when I determined I was the only one in my apartment, my heart rate began to settle and I started thinking about what happened. I realized that maybe these notes weren't threats, but warnings. I decided that I would go next door and talk to my neighbor to see if he was getting similar notes, but I couldn't shake the feeling that somebody was watching me. So before I exited my apartment, I checked the peephole, and I'm glad I did. At first, the hallway looked completely empty, but slowly I started to see a shadow emerge from the right side of the hallway. The first thing I saw was a man's shoe appear in the front of my door. Then the rest of his body followed. He was a middle-aged man wearing an ill-fitting gray suit that was full of wrinkles. His hair was parted in the middle, and I kept trying to think if I'd seen him before, but I couldn't be sure. There's so many people that live in my building that I may have seen him, but just didn't recognize him. I told myself that he was just passing by my door and tried to control my breathing as I looked out the peephole. But that's when he stopped right in front of my door and stared at me. I know it's impossible, but it seemed like he could see me through the peephole. He looked directly at me and waved. Instinctively, I stumbled back, falling to the ground and creating a loud crash, and I sat there quietly. I tried not to breathe because I didn't want to make any more noise than I already had. After a few minutes, I decided to go check to see if the man was still there. I was convinced that when I put my eye to the peephole, his was going to be right there, looking straight back at me. But when I checked, the man was gone. At this point, I knew I needed to call for help. I had no clue what was going on, but I did know that somebody had been in my apartment and I needed help. So I immediately go into my purse to grab my phone, but it's not there. I know I put my phone in my purse. I remember putting it in my purse. I always put it in my purse. At this point, I knew I needed to leave my apartment. I needed to go find help. I needed to talk to somebody about what was going on, but I was terrified. I felt like I was frozen and stuck in that apartment. I couldn't even leave if I wanted to. And that's when I heard a rapid knocking at my door. The knocking outside my door wasn't loud or aggressive. It sounded urgent. Whoever was outside my door was terrified. When I looked out the peephole, I saw a girl that I recognized about my age who lived on my floor. I didn't say anything at first, but she continued to knock. And then she started begging for me to let her in. Because I have talked to her a few times in the past, I reluctantly opened the door just a crack, but she pushed my door completely in, ran inside, and slammed the door behind her. When she saw the note that had been hung up in my apartment, she burst into tears and asked me if I got one too. She had no idea what was going on. She said that she also had a note in her apartment, and she'd been hiding out there all day. She told me I was the first one she heard come home, and she ran right over. She told me that she was looking through her peephole and saw the man outside of my apartment and waited till he went away to come over. Based on the fear in her eyes, I realized that this situation was not just somebody messing with us. This was serious and we needed to get out. I told her it was time to leave. We needed to go downstairs and go get help. And that's when she told me we couldn't. She said there was no way out. I couldn't even comprehend what this girl was saying to me. And she obviously noticed by the look on my face, because that's when she told me, once you're in here, you're stuck. I obviously still looked confused because that's when she continued. She said, do you know who I am? I was like, I mean, we've talked a few times in the hallways, but to be honest, I don't remember your name. I'm so sorry. And that's when she looks at me and she goes, no, you don't know me. We've never met. We've never talked. And I don't live in this building. I started laughing. Like, this situation was getting absolutely ridiculous. Of course I knew her. We've talked. We're neighbors. And that's when she looks at me with the most serious expression and goes, think about it. Is this really your home? I looked around at my apartment. It was sparsely decorated. There were no photos anywhere, no mail, nothing. It looked staged. It looked like nobody had ever lived there. Then I looked at the girl in my apartment. I really looked at her and tried to remember the conversations we had, but I couldn't. I had a feeling that I had met her, but there were no specific memories of meeting her at all. That's when it hit me. I started to try and think of my life, my family, my friends, where I really live, anything, and nothing. My mind was blank. So there I was, standing in an apartment that wasn't mine, in complete shock. The girl then asked me my name, which was the only thing I could remember about myself, and she told me that hers was Cassie. I asked her why she came to my apartment. If she has no idea what's going on right now, why would she trust me? I could be anybody. And that's when she told me that she didn't have a choice and asked, should I trust you? And I was like, yeah, honestly, at this point, I'm probably the only person you can trust. I told her that we couldn't hide out forever and we needed to get out of here, figure out a plan, figure out something to do. But I was so tired and weak and I just needed to sit down. So I sat on my couch and she told me that I looked horrible and that I needed to eat something. She said, let's make you something for lunch and then we'll figure out a plan. But I didn't care how weak I was. I knew I needed to get out of there. So without saying anything, I just get up and storm out of my apartment. I immediately go to the elevator and click the button over and over and over again, but nothing happens. Then I decide that I'll try to take the stairs, but when I go there, the door is locked. That's when I hear the elevator ding. I'm thrilled. I think that finally I'm going to be able to get downstairs, but when I go, I see that there's somebody in the elevator. It's the man in the gray suit. Our eyes met, and then he looked behind me at my front door where Cassie was standing. She just started screaming for me to get back inside, and as the man started taking a step towards me, I bolted back into the apartment. At this point, Cassie is absolutely frantic. She's screaming at me, I told you there's no way out. There's no way out of here. And that's when I start hearing a loud banging on my front door. I hear a man's voice who I'm assuming to be the man in the gray suit, and he's just yelling over and over again, it's not too late, it's not too late. At this point, I'm trying to figure out what to do. My eyes are darting between the two exits from my apartment, the front door and the window. And as I'm looking at the window, Cassie says, I mean, you could always jump. And a giant smile spread across her face. I ask her what she's talking about. I'm like, Cassie, what do you mean jump from the window? That is a terrible idea. And that's when she starts to laugh. She sits down on the couch, crosses her legs, and all the fear that was on her face completely disappeared. She looked joyful, almost childlike. That's when she looks me dead in the eyes and says, I asked if you were dangerous, but you never asked if I was. I look at her in complete shock. I'm like, did you leave all those notes? Are you the one who did this? And she said, no. Why would I warn you? That's when the banging on the door got louder and louder before I heard it completely bust in. And before I even had a chance to look, I felt an arm grabbing me, pulling me out my front door and pushing me straight into the elevator. As I looked out the elevator doors from the floor, I saw Cassie standing in my doorway with the biggest smile on her face, laughing. As the elevator doors closed, she said, don't be too long, I'll be waiting. That's when I realized that my immediate concern was protecting myself from whoever was in this elevator with me, and I quickly realized it was the man in the gray suit. Immediately, I started fighting back, and he took my shoulders, pinned them down against the floor, and screamed at me that he was trying to help me. He screamed at me, she lured me in too. She lured us all in, and once she makes you eat something, you can never leave again, but it's not too late for you. And then the doors open to the first floor of the building and he looks at me and tells me to run. But before I go, I asked him his name. It was the one thing I remembered, so I assumed he'd remember too. And he did. I tell the man I can't just leave him there all by himself and just run. But he told me I have to. And he said that she will find a way to lure me back. The first moments leaving that building are completely a blur. I just remember running as fast as I could. And the farther I got away from the building, the more of my real memories started to come back. I remembered my family, my friends, and I remembered where I really lived. When I got home, I spent hours researching the name of the man in the building until I finally found him. He had disappeared 5 years ago on the way to a job interview. As I continued to research the man, I realized that A year prior to his disappearance, he had disappeared another time. He was gone for a few days before he turned up at his parents' house, confused, not knowing what was going on. I can't even imagine what everybody thought. They probably thought that he went crazy or something, but he didn't. And Cassie found a way to lure him back. The man told me that I needed to forget about this place, but how was I supposed to? And I just kept thinking about why Cassie let me leave so easily. If she was able to control my thoughts, my memories, my perception of reality, why did she let me go? But that's when I realized the look of joy on her face. This was all a sick game to her, and she knows that she can lure me in for another round.
Am I the astronaut for demanding my husband stop seeing his run buddy? Run buddy in quotation marks here. I'm 28 female and my husband is 29 male. We've been happily married for 4 years and have a daughter together. However, things have taken an unfortunate turn recently when he started going for runs at a track and met a 19-year-old female. He didn't tell me about this at first when he started it, but he told me shortly after that he runs with her 3 days a week, with each run usually lasting around 90 minutes. They even socialize afterwards. My husband is a former athlete and she's currently an athlete on her college team. I let it go on for weeks, but eventually I started to feel that this wasn't appropriate and wanted him to spend that time with me and our family instead. I told him this and asked him to cut her off, but he told me to relax. We got into an argument and he called me insecure. In response, I called him immature and accused him of trying to relive his youth. Oh, we're in battle mode now. I also reminded him that he has responsibilities and that his daughter wants to spend more time playing with him. The argument didn't lead to any resolution and neither of us changed our positions. I'm unsure if I'm in the wrong for feeling this way, but I can't help feeling jealous that my husband is socializing with a 19-year-old female who is much younger and prettier than me. I feel like my concern is valid. Am I the astronaut? All right, here's the update, 9/26/24. I asked my friend to go to the track when they were supposed to run on the track only. My husband doesn't know this friend of mine that well. I made friends with her recently. She told me that after the run, they both sat down on the grass afterwards, and there was physical contact between the shoulders, as in they both were sitting close to each other. They were both smiling and looking happy and showing each other their phones. They did this for 10 to 15 minutes until they were rested. Then both just went back home. They don't go get smoothies every time, it looks like. I guess they rested because they didn't want to drive immediately after while their legs were tired. I'm not sure what to make of this, though. The close physical contact is extremely bothersome. My husband has only gone to the track twice this week. He doesn't intend on going the next 3 days, compared to the 3 times per week, which began 3 weeks ago. My friend told me that it gave off the energy that she was crushing on him. My husband came home. I greeted him and began to prepare dinner, and I see him on his phone. It gives a weird feeling that he might be communicating with her. I asked him while we were in bed together, how often does she go to the track? He says she goes there every day, and he just sends her a text to let her know if he's coming that day. I asked him how often does he intend on going per week, and he said 2 to 3, which are long runs. I asked him more, and I could see him being kind of suspicious regarding my questioning. I asked him to detail how much time he spends after the run. He said that he spends some time resting, which is around 15 to 30 minutes, and sometimes they go walk to the smoothie place, which is like a 10 to 15 minute walk, and socialize there 10 to 15 minutes, and then walk back 10 to 15 minutes, then go home. There's a lot of 10 to 15 minute things going on here. What matters is that they spend 45 to 75 minutes together after the run. I asked him if I could meet her, like invite her over for dinner. He said that when me and her get closer in the future, I think so. The wording of that made me uncomfortable. I then asked him how long does he think that it will be until they are close enough. He said he's not sure, and at this point he just reassured me that I'm being nervous and anxious for no reason and that he only likes me. He said this in a playful and laughing manner. Then he just said that I could drop our daughter off at my mother's place and come run with them. I said, I'll think about it. That was it in that regard. I also went on his phone earlier again. At this time, I went onto the private account of his friend, and she posted an Instagram story of my husband and her drinking smoothies together. That's all. Not sure what to do now. I can't tell my husband not to go to the track anymore, even though I prefer that he doesn't. He hasn't really done anything alarming with her except them sitting down really close together post-run. Again, I'm not sure if this was done with the intention of being intimate. I think it's just done because they were sharing their running stats on their phone.
Am I in the wrong for not giving my daughter a car on her 16th birthday and cutting her off financially? I, 48 male, have a daughter, Lisa, 15 female, from my first marriage. I'm not on particularly good terms with her mother, and Lisa unfortunately became an outlet for her resentment towards me, which ended up souring our relationship massively. Lisa is a good person, but unfortunately she takes after her mom in terms of demeanor and often acts rude and entitled. A few years ago I married again. Lisa decided not to attend my wedding, and she said a bunch of hurtful things to my then fiance Rosemary, 38 female. Since then, our relationship got even worse. When Rosemary and I welcomed our son a year and a half ago, Lisa sent me a text saying that since I have my perfect baby now, I could stop pestering her and trying to play family with her. It hurt me deeply, and I ended up dissing myself from her, though I kept sending her $100 a month for her allowance. Recently, we had an unplanned addition to our family. Long story short, Rosemary's sister, who wasn't a good parent to start with, terminated her custody rights over her son Blake. Rosemary and I decided to take Blake in. Unfortunately, a few years ago, Blake got into a horrible car wreck that left him permanently disabled. Luckily, he can somewhat walk and doesn't need 24/7 assistance around the house, but that's about it. Blake is an amazing person and he quickly became part of our family. I decided to give the $100 allowance to Blake instead. He was beyond happy and grateful. I also made a hard decision and gave him my car. It's a 22 Cadillac Escalade, and I was planning on getting rid of it this year anyway since Lisa is turning 16 in a month and I wanted to give it to Lisa. Now it's Blake's car and he absolutely loves it. He really needed a car because his mobility issues don't let him get around easily anymore. And it changed his life massively. Of course, Lisa didn't like it. When she realized that she wasn't getting any allowance, she called me and asked what's wrong. It was the first call I received from her in a year, if not more. I explained that now when my family had expanded, I don't have enough money. I'll still be sending her mom the child support payments as per the court agreement, but she shouldn't expect anything extra. She asked me about the car since she knew about my plans on giving it to her. I told her that now the situation changed and she could no longer have the car. I'll admit, what I said next was probably pretty a-hole-ish of me, since I told her that now I have 2 children to play family with and asked her to stop pestering me. This caused her to blow up completely to the point that she got her mom to call me and scream at me, and so did her new husband. They threatened to sue me. Lisa said that she'll go no contact and so on. I just brushed off their threats, especially since Rosemary is a lawyer and I made peace with my poor contact with Lisa years ago. They also managed to write a few mean things to Rosemary and Blake, and this is what got me wondering whether I was an a-hole here or not.
I caught my stepdad cheating on my mum the day before his wedding. Story time. So the day before my mum and stepdad Steve's wedding, I caught him smooching and snuggling with my mum's sister on the sofa. Immediately told my siblings. Me and my siblings sprung into action so freaking quick. Grabbed his phone from off the side and we were gathering evidence. Now, this wedding was a little bit different. Before the ceremony, my mum had asked me and my sister to do a little speech, to which we of course said yes to. We created a little PowerPoint with loads of beautiful memories of Steve and my mum. But we were going to do it a little bit differently. I made sure to add all of the videos and pictures of Steve and my auntie to this presentation. The ceremony begins. It's beautiful. My mum looks incredible in her dress. So Steve is stood next to my mum and the presentation starts playing. This is when the pictures of Amy and Steve popped up. What a shame. Steve literally ran at me and my sister. We turned to look at my mum, who literally flung her heels off and her veil and threw them at Steve. She then walked up to him, she bitch slapped him. He's screaming at me and my sister saying, "How could you?" My auntie, the one that was seeing Steve, then runs over to me and my sister and starts apologising profusely. Like it was an accident. Oh, what do you mean, Susan? You just fucking tripped and fell? Okay. And then she runs up to Steve, goes, "Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. I'll marry you instead." You can't steal someone's wedding. If there's one thing Amy has, it's the audacity, okay? Anyway, this is when things started to go downhill. It started to get physical. I always think, imagine going to this wedding as a guest and expecting such a nice day, you know, celebrating the love of your friends and your family. Next thing you know, you're getting like your nudes of your auntie showing up. Also, a little request, if you have any spooky, ghost, Halloween-y type stories, please do send them in via the link in my bio. I want to get some good ones going for Halloween. Love ya! Mwah!